If the apparent failure of the Copenhagen climate meet wasn't enough, scandals like Climategate and Glaciergate have ensured that climate scientists, once regarded as the saviors of the world, are now fighting to salvage their reputation.
I have no intentions of resigning from my position.
Climate skeptics are riding on the back of these claims to argue against the transition to a low-carbon economy. While the data used may have been wrong and the findings misrepresented, the damage to climate can't be denied.
There are those who disagree with the overwhelming scientific evidence on climate change. But here's the thing. Even if you doubt the evidence, providing incentives for energy efficiency and clean energy are the right thing to do for our future.
In the first week of February, Washington, D.C. saw its highest snowfall in a single day in 90 years. A climate change that left the American capital paralyzed. Closer home, hill stations like Shimla have recorded their warmest winter ever. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency estimated that global carbon emissions are to increase by 74% over the next 2 decades. Developing countries like China and India are expected to contribute the most to these new emissions. The agency says at this rate, the average surface temperature of the Earth will increase by 18 degrees Celsius by the end of the 21st century. So what does all this mean for the world we live in?
The social cost of disrupting the climate will be felt first by the poor. It will be felt most by farmers who are rangeland farmers. It will be felt in busties before it's felt in high-rises. It will be felt in poor countries before it's felt in rich countries. So the social changes will be to make those among us who are most vulnerable even worse off.
Experts say the only way forward is to adopt a mix of adaptation and mitigation efforts to combat climate change. Mitigation methods involve fuel-efficient cars, renewable energy resources, and the use of carbon credits to reduce and control emission rates. Adaptation, on the other hand, involves drought-resistant crops, improved methods of rainwater storage, and cloud seeding, methods that adapt to the changing climate. A large number of countries are already following these methods, but all this is not nearly enough. Needless to say, the economic costs of protecting the environment will be on the rise. So just how much will the world spend on this cause? A United Nations report suggested that anywhere between $49 to $171 billion will be needed by the world to adapt to climate change till 2030. In 2006, Nicholas Stern of the London School of Economics estimated that climate change could cost the world as much as 5 to 6% of its GDP if emissions were not controlled. The estimates and focus areas are in place, but the means are not. The developed world has patented most green technologies, and so the cost of going green for developing economies has become significantly higher. Over the past few years, developing economies have been lobbying for cheaper and easier access to green tech, and they've also asked for financial aid to help reduce their carbon footprint. Many had pinned their hopes on the climate meet at Copenhagen, held last year to help solve the funding problem. But the meet went on a different track altogether, with the US refusing to accept any binding emission targets.
America's made our choice.
And India and China following suit.
In the weeks following Copenhagen, I called Washington, New Delhi, I called Brazil, South Africa, a number of countries, and everyone is saying we need to take the Copenhagen Accord and use it to reinvigorate the formal negotiations, not to start a separate track.
Governments across the world, including the US, China and India, are trying to make that possible. The US recently set an emissions target of 17% by the year 2020. India and China too have committed to targets of 25% and 45 to 50% by 2020. And now that these three countries have apparently settled their differences on the matter, all eyes are on the forthcoming G20 meet to be held in June in Canada.